Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers, thanks for coming back to the channel. You know, we've got another ranking video here for you today. It's kind of a ranking slash review video. It's going to be on The Crew series. Yes, we're talking about another driving game series. We're going to be talking about Ubisoft's The Crew. Now for the unfamiliar, The Crew is a trilogy of open world online racing games developed by Ubisoft Ivory Towers, with the first release all the way back in 2014, and the latest game being The Crew Motorfest, just releasing recently on all modern consoles. Now, The Crew has had an interesting history. Ubisoft's not really known for racing games. The Crew is really their only big racing game series that they've ever had, and it's actually stuck around. The first game was really heralded for recreating the United States and being kind of an MMO light. The second game would reuse the whole going around the US gimmick, only now with boats and planes. The third game, Crew Motorfest, instead takes place on a scaled down version of Oahu. These three games though have massive open worlds to explore with a bunch of activities in them. Each one of them has a pretty lengthy single player, but it also has a bunch of multiplayer activities as well. These games are basically MMO lights as you drive around. There are a bunch of other players driving with you, kind of similar to Autolog from Need for Speed, but you can participate in giant events with upwards of like 50 to 100 people in them. There's even what is essentially raids in the first game, these large scale races, and of course you can just freely drive around the world with your friends. You know, it is called The Crew for a reason. You want to have your squad, your crew. On top of that, these three games were all live service titles. Before live service was even like a thing, these games were getting updates pretty regularly, adding events, cars, activities, etc. And I know that there was actually a good amount of people that really got into the Crew series and sunk a lot of time into these games. Now, these games are not hardcore racing sims. They're not ultra realistic. They don't have the fanciest interior design, and graphically, they don't stand up to the Forzas and the Gran Turismos, and the attention to detail isn't amazing. These are more arcade racers, kind of casual, but are still a ton of fun. You know, I've played all three of these games. I put a good amount of time into all three of them, and I've had a good amount of fun with them. I love driving games. Racing games are maybe my favorite genre of video games, and so I thought I'd come in here, give each game a little review, rank them worst to best, see how they stack up, what's the best, what's the worst, which has the best driving, best mechanics, worst AI, etc. You know how it goes. Look, I've given these games enough of an intro already. Let's just get right into it. Let me know down below your favorite Crew game, how you're going to have a happy Crew year. Like, share, comment, sub. We got the super thanks going on. Let's just get into it. Of the three Crew games, what do I think is the weakest? Pretty obvious. And here we have The Crew 1 releasing in 2014. I very much remember when this game came out. I was still in high school, and I remember people were saying like, oh, you can drive across all of America. It's like Destiny, but with cars. It's going to be this cool upcoming racing game that gets updated all the time. And I got it when it came out, and I played a few hours of it and went, yeah, maybe this isn't for me. And I didn't return to it till many years later, after a bunch of fixes and updates, and I went, yeah, you know, it's okay, it's alright, it's half decent. I'm not going to say it's one of the best racing games of the last generation, and it doesn't really hold a candle to any modern Need for Speed games outside of Payback, but it's okay. Now, something The Crew 1 has that's pretty different from the other two games is it does have a full-length single-player mode with like an actual plot and characters. It's about this guy named Alex trying to figure out about the death of his brother, and I remember the first time I played this game, I thought the plot was just bad. It was not exactly well written. It seemed really corny and cheesy, and I was just like, why is this in the game? And when I came back to it, I felt the exact same way. I don't really care for the plot. It's not very good. It's generic. It's incredibly predictable. It's just really dull, and I didn't like it. You know, I remember thinking even Watch Dogs had a better story than this game. Like, it just sucks. It sucks, and it's really not worth talking about. What is worth talking about is the world. That was the big selling point of The Crew, is they did recreate the United States, all 48 states that you could possibly go to. They're all here. They've all got a bunch of landmarks, and, you know, obviously it's going to be crunched down. It's not going to be exactly accurate. It only takes like an hour or two to drive across the map, but it is a really unique gimmick that has not really been seen again outside of The Crew 2, and we're going on like 10 years since this game came out. So it still does have some novelty. It still does feel unique. Obviously, there's a bunch of moments where you'll be driving and you go, well, this doesn't make any sense, like how Texas isn't too far from California, but in real life, that's obviously not the case. And, you know, it's scaled down. I'm going to give it some leeway. I'm not going to roast it too hard. I think the open world, it's unique. It's fun to go through. There's a lot of different areas you'll go through. There's actually a lot of variety. And yeah, I'd say it's decently well designed. It's one of the better Ubisoft open worlds. especially for the time where they felt particularly empty and just kind of boring. And it's worth noting there's like no loading screens at all. You know, if you drive from one end to the next, no loading screens, no pauses. It does render everything, which it's still cool nowadays. Alright, so the world might be decent, but what exactly are you doing in this game? You're driving. You're doing lots of driving. There's the single player campaign with a bunch of missions, and then there's all the multiplayer activities. When it comes to the single player campaign, that's probably what you're going to be playing nowadays since the game isn't exactly all that active online. It's nothing you haven't seen before in a racing game, especially an open world racing game. Really, they took Ubisoft's open world formula everyone knows and doesn't love anymore and put it into a driving game where dropped onto this pretty big environment. There's main missions. You'll drive to the main mission. They will give you the mission. There's also side quests. There's other side activities and then a bunch of collectibles. Kinda open world games 101. But when it comes to the main missions, again, nothing you really haven't seen before for a driving game. You'll be driving through checkpoints, doing time trials, races, trying to get somewhere so fast, and then driving in between the missions themselves. Hey, nobody said this was creative, innovative, or original when it came to its missions, because it's none of those things. If you've played really any arcade racer from the last 15 years, you'll be right at home here. And with how it feels, the game feels pretty decent. I'm not going to say it feels like really nice, but it feels okay. Turning can be a little iffy sometimes, but the controls and just the feel and the physics of the Crew 1, it's decent. You can even customize your vehicles, and look, the customization, like, it's okay at best. Need for Speed and Midnight Club kind of drive circles around this game in many aspects, but look, you can customize your vehicle, so that's something. And the single player campaign, it's got a decent length to it, taking well over 10 hours, and after I finished it, I didn't feel like I wasted my time. It wasn't god-awful like Need for Speed Undercover or something. And you know what, while we're on the subject of Need for Speed Undercover, I remember that game had such shit AI, and you know what, the Crew has that in common with it. The AI in the Crew is terrible. It is rubber bandy as hell. It doesn't really matter how good or bad you are. The AI is just kind of always around you. I remember first time I played this game, I was like, what the fuck is this? Nowadays though, after playing all the Need for Speed games, it's much more common than you think, but yeah, the AI is terrible in this game. But anyway, outside of the main missions, there are some side activities you can do. You can do some side races with your crew, and there are little activities here and there, like driving past these gates or going super fast. And you know, it doesn't really matter if I played this game back like 10 years ago or nowadays. I've always thought the side content in this game is mid at best. It is not very good. Like, it is very cookie cutter, generic, open world, Ubisoft, kind of just side content garbage. At least you don't have to do it alone. You know, you can have your crew join you, but good luck getting anyone you know to not only play this game with you, but do the side content with you. Like, it's there, it exists, but I didn't find it particularly fun, rewarding, or engaging. And I'm not even like gonna mention the raid vehicle missions. These just take way too long, and I did not find these particularly all that fun. But like I said, side content, it exists. Same kind of goes for the role-playing elements in this game, you know, upgrading the car, getting the new cars. It just kind of is here. I don't think it particularly adds anything. And then, you know, if all that wasn't enough, the game, I remember, was littered with microtransactions. The user interface wasn't particularly great, and the presentation as a whole was just kind of okay. Like, the game looked fine and it ran fine, and the music was okay, but it didn't do anything special. It looked rather generic, actually. And all this led to my experience with the Crew just being pretty mixed. Like, the game has some good to it, you know, the driving's okay, and I did have some fun here and there, but I wouldn't say there's anything particularly great, but there's not anything particularly awful about it either. Even at its worst, I still wouldn't say the game is bad. I would just say it's very middling. Like, there's a reason that the first Crew game didn't really take off all that much. There wasn't a ton of people talking about it outside of the first month or two, because most people were just kind of like, it's just like, alright. But the game actually sold decently well, and someone convinced Ubisoft to make a second game, so here we have The Crew 2. Now, I remember when I went to E3 in 2017 and I saw the Pooh 2, and like nobody was in line to play it, and I didn't play it either. I went, you know, the first game wasn't that great. I don't really want to waste my time with that. I think I'd rather play the new South Park or Far Cry game. And then it came out in 2018. I really didn't hear all that much about it. It wasn't until a little bit later, a year or two later, where I actually did hear some stuff about it. People were saying, yeah, it's actually pretty good. Ubisoft's been updating it regularly, and it's just a hell of a lot better than the first game. And I went, huh, okay, I guess I'll check it out. And you know, after putting some time into it, yeah, this is a pretty decent racing game. And if you've played the second game, you really don't need to go back to the first one. It kind of does make the first one obsolete. This game doesn't really have a story or plot or premise or characters or any of that, and that's fine. You just kind of want to be the best, and you want to be a really great driver in multiple vehicular racing disciplines. That's a fine enough story for me. We don't need some corny, generic, predictable story that is just a waste of time. Another great point to this is from pretty much the moment you start, you can explore the entire open world, start doing races and events, or just driving around with your friends. And the big selling point of the Crew 2 was that you're exploring all of America, doing races all over America, but not just in a car. Now you have some off-road vehicles like bikes and monster trucks, and then the big ones, the boats and the planes. Yes, you can actually go in the water with boats, whether it's oceans, lakes, rivers, and then you also have planes where you can fly really over the entire map. You can fly super high into the air, and then you can switch to a car on the dime. This isn't like Diddy Kong Racing where the race has to be set up for a certain vehicle type. You really can just switch on the fly. So if you are in the water and for whatever reason you want to just turn into a car and sink, the game will absolutely let you do that. You want to fly high into the sky and then turn into a boat and fall on an ocean, yeah, the game will let you do it. And I'm gonna give it a thumbs up. I like that freedom. I like how you can freely switch between these. This actually is still unique on top of the whole it's all of America kind of gimmick. And I think it's one of the more varied racers. It's one of the more unique racing games out there, sure. When you're driving around America in a car, it does feel kind of similar to the first game. I mean, the map isn't exactly all that different. America isn't exactly all that different. So yeah, feels a little similar, but then you throw in all these other vehicle types and it feels unique. All the vehicles have not only different physics to them, but they all handle incredibly different. The cars, they handle relatively the same as the Crew 1, like they control a little better. They're the best controlling vehicle by far, and they're probably the nicest to drive. But the boats are no slouch. I actually do like driving the boats here. The water physics aren't like spectacular. They're not as good as say Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed or maybe Hydro Thunder Hurricane, but I think the water physics are quite decent here. I did have some fun in the water, maybe it's because I love Hydro Thunder, but driving the boat was cool. When you're in the air in the plane, it's fine. I mean, I'm not going to say it's really better than like a GTA game. Like the physics aren't phenomenal and it's not the most exciting, but it's functional. It doesn't feel horrible, but it's just okay. The coolest aspect is by far just being able to switch between all three of them on the fly, as I can't really think of any other game that does this outside of the other Crew game. And I think it's cool that some of the events actually do utilize this. When it comes to the events in the Poo 2, it's not the most varied, it's not the most innovative, it's actually quite similar to the first game. A lot of the game is just races. You're racing other people, you're racing the clock, it's kind of like a time trial, get somewhere so fast. Sometimes it's laps, oftentimes it's not. Point A to B as fast as you can. Obviously there's some time trials. There are some other challenges in here, especially when like the off-roading is concerned, and I think there is a little bit of variety here, but yeah, it's not exactly innovative. But I found so much more enjoyment in these events than the first games, maybe just because of the different vehicle types, maybe like they just felt more varied or they just hit a little different from the first game. But I actually did have some fun with these ones. I'm not going to say there's any like huge standouts and the missions aren't like mind-blowing, but they're actually a good time. And you can do just about every mission with your crew. You can have your friends join you for really every event. It's actually pretty cool in that sense, way more than the first games. And the game actually does incentivize you having a crew, unlike the first game where it was fine to do everything by yourself. The AI is also a little better. It's not the rubber bandy shit from the first game. It still is a bit rubber bandy, but it's not just ridiculous like the first game. Unfortunately, something that's not improved from the first game is the microtransactions and the user interface, both of which still here, and I still don't really like either of them. And something else to bring up is the live service aspect. Like, Ubisoft really kept updating the Crew 2 for years. They kept adding new events and cars, and it's actually pretty nice. The game didn't have a huge player base, but Ubisoft really did reward the people that stuck with it and kept giving them more and more. Now, the Crew 1 did have two bigger expansions, but I just never really messed around with these. By the time I got to them, I was just so done with the first game. This game, though, the updates and expansions, these are actually good. They're worth playing, especially if you like the Crew 2, and it's pretty cool that they're here. The car selection and customization is quite a bit better than the first game. The presentation as a whole is better than the first game. Like, it looks a bit better, it runs nice, the music is decent. I really don't have a ton of issues with this game. I think it's a solid improvement on the first game. It fixes some of the glaring issues of the first game, like the AI and the side content being mid at best. I think both are improved in this game. Look, I'm not going to come out here and say this is one of the best driving games you could ever play, but it's a decent, fun little time if you're looking for a different open world driving game that isn't Forza or Need for Speed. Then maybe the Crew 2 is up your alley, especially if you like the boats and planes idea. It's probably, no, not probably, it is dirt cheap and is included in multiple subscription services now, so you can totally try it there. But here we have the recently released Crew Motorfest. Now I am a little disappointed that it's not called the Crew 3 with the E as the 3, but I'll live another day. After playing this game for the last week or so, I can tell you without a doubt in my mind, this is the best of the Crew games. Not only is it a huge improvement in just about every aspect on the first two games, but it has a personality, something the first two games didn't really have. Sure, it really does give off vibes of we have Forza Horizon at home, but that doesn't really change the fact that I've actually had a ton of fun with this game, way more than I expected. Just like the Crew 2, it doesn't really have a story. You just get dropped onto Oahu and Hawaii and are like, yeah, you're going to race in a bunch of different vehicle types and you're going to have some fun. This game really is like a celebration of vehicle culture, of car culture in particular. This game does bring back the planes, the boats, the bikes, and the ATVs from the Crew 2, but the focus really is on the cars here. There are more car events than all of the other vehicles I mentioned combined by like a huge amount. The focus is the cars. You can still absolutely switch on the fly like the Crew 2, but you just won't find many events that involve the boats or the planes, and that's fine with me because driving in the cars, it actually feels really nice. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed driving around in this game. The physics, the simcade feel of this game, it's actually really nice. Driving is tight, it's responsive, it's satisfying. It's a good time to drive. I was actually kind of surprised with how good this felt. It felt way better than the first two Crew games. I was like, wow, this is good. This is actually really good. And then depending on the type of car you have, it can actually feel different. You know, those heavy ass trucks, they do feel different from the Mazdas and the Porsches. And I'm gonna give them some credit here. I'm gonna give them a little clap here. The cars really do feel different from each other, and they actually put a lot of detail and work into the feel and the look of these cars. And I'll be honest, the other vehicles, they don't feel that great in this game, actually. All the focus, it feels like, was put on the cars. The boat, you know, the boat's alright. It feels like how it did in Crew 2, which is fine. But the planes, nah, I was not digging this. I was like, this really doesn't feel any better. It might actually feel a little worse than the Crew 2s. I just didn't really care much for it. Same goes for the ATVs and the bikes. Nah, this is not MX versus ATV. It does not feel very good. It's not great. The focus was clearly on the cars here, and as you play through the game, they give you a huge history lesson on not only these cars, but car culture in general. Clearly, they are massive fans of everything to do with cars, and I really did enjoy the vibes of this game. In fact, this game just has a personality, a chill, laid-back personality to celebrate car culture, and yeah, it's not the most different from Forza Horizon, but I actually do like the personality here. It just feels more lighthearted and fun, and that's kind of missing in most games nowadays. It's just all about putting you in some fast cars and just having a good time, and really, what else could you ask for? The cars feel nice, they look nice. Presentation wise, I think the game is great. It is a big improvement on Crew 2, and the music, it's okay. You know, there's some old stuff that I recognize and then a bunch of modern air quotes music that I just don't recognize, but the music's there. Presentation generally nice, and the game ran great. Nothing to complain about here. So when it comes to how this game plays outside of the driving, what exactly can you do in this game? The main mode is the single player playlists. What these playlists are: a series of events centered around some kind of theme. Like one playlist, the theme is all about exploring Hawaii, seeing what it has to offer. Another theme is about Japanese sport cars. One's about these F1 looking cars. One's about boats. One's about motorcycles. One's about electric cars. Like, they're all centered around a theme, and they just have like 7 or 8 different events in them. And most of these events are just races, you know, point A to B or a couple laps. But there actually is some variety here when it comes to the missions. There are some other mission types, and I was kind of surprised by a few of these. There's like obstacle courses, and the one that really shocked me was drag racing. I haven't seen drag racing in a game in forever, but very welcoming to see in 2023. There's a decent amount of variety here, more so than the first two games, and I really did enjoy how all the playlists felt different from each other because the cars feel different, the event types are different. It's actually varied, and it's engaging, and it was fun. However, something that I didn't think was so much fun was listening to the characters talk to me about really anything. Sure, it's cool you're getting history lessons about car culture and stuff, but man, this game is cringe so often. But it's not the end of the world because, again, I was actually having a fun time while going through the map. I think it's a really unique setting. Outside of Test Drive Unlimited, I can't think of like any games in Hawaii, and I think it's great to drive through. There's a lot of variety with the environment, and you'll see like everything if you do all these playlists, and it takes a good while to go through these playlists. It's actually quite a bit of content, but outside of the playlists, you have the multiplayer events. There's I can't believe it, a Battle Royale mode, and the shocking part's actually kind of fun. Yeah, I couldn't believe it either, but I was like, damn, I actually had fun with that. What the hell? Like, the battle royale is decent in this game. And then there's also these grand races where there's like 30 of you, and you do a pretty big race that's around 10 minutes going through some different environments with some different cars, and I really enjoy these also. Like, this is some of the most fun I've had all year in a racing game, and I'm really kind of surprised by that. I didn't really expect this game to be much better, if any better than the Crew 2, but I'm walking away pleasantly surprised with the Crew Motorfest. Like, it has a ton of content. You can import all your cars from Crew 2, which is crazy. There's an okay amount of customization, but just that selection of cars alone, it's actually pretty solid. There's a ton of events. The multiplayer is actually fun, and with it being a live service and based off the Crew 2's track record, I have no doubt that this game will be supported for years to come. I'm going to preface here, say this video is not sponsored by Ubisoft, but I can't believe it, I'm actually recommending the Crew Motorfest. If you like driving games, then yeah, I think it's worth checking out. If you like Simcade, or you're looking for the next driving game you can sink some serious time into that isn't Forza, yeah, I think this is worth playing. You know, it's got a ton of content, it's a fun time, it feels nice, and it looks good too. You can even play a free 5-hour trial where all of your progress carries over to the main game to see if you like it. I don't really see any reason to not try the Crew Motorfest. It's actually a good driving game, and I'd say it's one of the more underrated games I've played this year. I didn't see like anybody talking about this game even after it came out, and I don't see a ton of people talking about it now, but if you like driving games, it's worth checking out. Honestly, at this point, you can skip Crew 1 and 2, just play the Crew Motorfest. Newest, best one, ton of fun. Sure, it's not perfect, side content still kind of and the game does still feel a little Ubisoftian, where it's just kind of that big open world with stuff all over, but I really did have a fun time with this one. And that's it for today's video. We talked Crew 1, 2, and Motorfest. Let me know down below how you're feeling. If you made it to this part of the video, comment concrete, as in what's in the ground or in buildings. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye. Love ya.